Okay, so today I'm here to talk about change in the birds that we see every day. And I'm thankful for the opportunity to come down here. I love being in South America. One of my favorite things besides all the people is the wonderful food. And on days like this, the lack of snow. We're having a bit of a late spring in Alberta where I'm from, and we're getting too much snow again lately, so it's a joy to see green. And so when we think about the bird, there has been, we know there's genetic change, we know that these birds are growing more quickly, they're putting on more muscle mass, and yet when it comes to the broiler breeder, we're managing this bird basically the same as we have for the last 20, 30 years. So since the 1970s, when we started feed restriction, we've kind of kept the same body weight targets and really haven't changed too much in terms of growth targets. Now, because the bird is changing, perhaps we need to look maybe at some different parts, different events that are happening in this bird's life and pay a little more attention to that change and think about our management practices and if that needs to change as well. So, in the life of this bird, in order for it to lay well, we need to deliver the nutrients to the bird as it needs it. And it has to be the right kind of nutrients and in the right amount. These birds, they love to grow breast muscle. If you give them too much protein at the wrong time, they grow a lot of breast muscle, and there's a cost to maintaining that muscle that could make it more difficult to support egg production. So, where do we get our information for this? We usually it's the history of our experience and of our friends and colleagues and technical people that we get the information from. But how do we recognize that something is changing or that perhaps we need to change? One thing is there's new technologies available to us. But the number one thing I still say is face time, spending time with the birds to see what is actually changing with things like behavior. So in the research world, we can look at what happens with the change and what the implications are on how the bird looks and some of the measurements we can make. So we know, for example, that today's broiler, growing to 6 weeks, can get quite large compared to the same genetic stock or genetic stocks from 50 years ago. So massive changes in growth potential, and yet the broiler breeder, we grow to about the same size and have about the same expectations for performance. But in there you have a bird with huge differences in appetite and less space for some of those support structures like the heart, the intestines, and there are implications for reproduction. Reproduction is less of a priority to these birds. One thing that we see in our industry in Canada is complaints about chick numbers. Now, really what's happening is that because the bird is growing so well, the feeling is that it's harder to get viable chicks from these hens. Is that true? When we look at the actual numbers over time from AgriStats for North America, we see from a fertility standpoint, the bird really hasn't changed too much. From the genetic company's perspective, the hatchability tends to be staying the same or even increasing. And so okay, so those of you who have access to farm data, does this fit what you see? Some producers say it doesn't.